People always say to me, well, why don't you just say no? And why do you need to say anything else? But I think that's a little harsh. But I think a lot of times we also make excuses about, well, why I can't do it. But we need to be able to say no without making excuses, because excuses will just back us into a corner. So that's why it's important to be able to say no productively and nicely.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Dave Learning Podcast. With me right now is Sarita Maybin, who delivered a phenomenal presentation on conflict resolution. And she's also the author of the book, If You Can't Say Something Nice, What Do You Say? Which is a little bit different than what we've been used to. Usually it's, if you can't say something nice, then don't say anything at all.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
So,
our mothers all told us that. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. But we all know that doesn't work at work.
it doesn't, right, because
Yeah.
we hear no quite a bit, and sometimes we need to say no.
Yeah, and we need to share those difficult things. And no is probably the most harsh of all those not nice things we're not supposed to say.
Yeah. So what inspired you to come up with this book?
Well, you know, it's so funny because I open every keynote with the same thing. I say to the audience, do you recognize the phrase, if you can't say something nice? And collectively, the audience will say, don't say anything at all, just as they did today, right on cue, at the Day of Learning. But then I kind of go the next step and say, hey, but isn't it true that we so often have to say things that aren't nice? But then how do you do that in a positive way? And of course, no. I mean, how harsh is that? That sounds like something we don't want to say at all, but we have to learn how to do that. People always say to me, well, why don't you just say no? And why do you need to say anything else? But I think that's a little harsh. But I think a lot of times we also make excuses about, well, why I can't do it. But we need to be able to say no without making excuses, because excuses will just back us into a corner. So that's why it's important to be able to say no productively and nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some of the helpful ways to say no? Like if you're in a situation where maybe I'm at work and I'm extremely busy or something like that, and I really can't do something.
Yep.
Like what are some ways there?
Well, so I have three things I suggest. The first one is compliment plus no. And that just means, you know, give people their due. You know, I know that project, you've worked a lot on that project and I know it's really great. I wish I could be part of it, but unfortunately I can't. And we don't have to give an excuse, but just to give them their props, to say, hey, you know what, I know that's a great project, unfortunately I'm not available. And that would be compliment. Its cousin would be empathy plus no, which is put yourself in their shoes. I know you're swamped, you really need somebody to stay and help with that, unfortunately I'm not available. And then of course, lastly, we can choose to say no, which is saying, you know what, I've just chosen to opt out this year. I've just chosen not to be able to, I've chosen not to do that because I really have other things I need to do, or I don't think that's going to work for me. That's my favorite line. I use it a lot. I don't know if that's going to work for me. So I use that line kind of informally a lot.
What do you say to people who have a hard time saying no, just in general? They want to please, they're people pleasers.
Yep. Well, you know, I feel like people pleasers, they would sooner die than say no, because that's not a way to please people. And so I often talk about what I call the guilt-free yes, which is a way to say yes but draw some boundaries so you don't get trampled over, because especially people pleasers will get trampled over. And I always say it's good to use words like if, when, and as soon as. So to say, you know what, I'd be happy to get that for you as soon as I finish up with this project. Or if you'll give me till tomorrow, I can get that for you. I can help you with that. And as soon as I finish up, when I'm done with this, whatever, then I will help out. So if we use words like if, when, and as soon as, those are kind of boundary drawing words, we can still say yes, but not feel guilty later. Because that's the thing, when we say yes, and then we're like, oh, why did I say yes? So guilt-free yes, that's what I call that.
No, I love that. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Is it okay to say, like, let me think on this for a while? Do you offer that as some helpful advice?
It is, although we all know that there's those occasions like we're in a meeting and our boss comes and says, you know, we need that now. And so then you can't say, well, let me think about it, boss. I'll get back to you on that. But we could say to the boss, you know what, I'd love to get that for you if you'll allow me to work on this other project, or better yet, I'd love to get that for you if you can tell me, boss, where it fits in the priority with the other 5 things I'm working on. And I always have to say that with a straight face, because really we're thinking, really? I'm already working on 5 other things for you, but we might have to say, if you can tell me where that fits in the priority order, so I can get a better idea of how to get that done for you.
Yeah, that's great, because you're protecting your time.
And your sanity, because sometimes we say, sure, 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 to everybody, yes, 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 and then we're losing our mind the next day and being a problem for everybody.
And then not being an effective performer either, too.
That's right.
Overwhelmed. Okay, so let's flip that over to actually receiving no, and you mentioned like you ask for more. So could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I think sometimes I talk a lot about my phrases, and I was sharing in the Day of Learning about I have a PDF of 50 phrases for all occasions, which is my little perk for those people who want to be getting my monthly communique every month. And one of the little perks for that is you get a 50 phrases PDF. But one of the things on the phrases that I talk about is asking questions. You know, someone says, I really need this for you, and the answer is no, and you don't want to say no, you know, you could ask, would you be willing to accept this tomorrow? Would you be okay with, or would it be possible to? And those are the kind of phrases we can use on both ends, whether we're receiving a no, like someone says, no, I can't do that for you. Would you be willing to reconsider if I can get you more information? You know, or would it be possible for me to get your commitment if we can wait until later in the week? Or what will it take to get a yes? So those are some of the kinds of phrases that I offer in terms of being able to encourage someone to say yes.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah.
And I think just stopping and thinking about that too gives maybe somebody else the opportunity to think about what they're really asking, what they're wanting. Because sometimes we're stressed. We got a lot of work to do, and we just need quick answers and quick feedback.
Yeah, and I think really, you know, when we talk about working together better, which is my whole focus, it really is reciprocal. It's a two-way process. You know, growing up as the oldest of 4 children, my 2 sisters and my brother used to love to say, "You're not the boss of me." And they remind me that regularly. And what was amusing to me is when I became a person in the working world, I realized most of the time I'm asking things of people, and I'm not the boss of them. So you're my coworker, and I'm saying, you know, would you be willing to help me on this project? Or can you do this for me? And so we're always kind of in a negotiation mode of having to work together better, and we're not necessarily the boss of that person. And so it's really, I think these are helpful tools when we're colleagues, we're equals, we're coworkers, teammates. How do we get that yes, or how do we protect ourselves when we don't want to say yes?
And even like family, too.
And family.
And practice that with family.
That's right. Yep. As I always say, home is where we go when we're tired of being nice. You know, at work, it's like, how can we work together better? How can we resolve this? At home, get upstairs right now. You know, we're just downright ugly. So at home as well, you're right. At home, it works as well.
Yeah.
So,
cool. Well, these are very useful tips, and I appreciate your time here.
It's been great.
What's some of the biggest feedback that you've received from the book?
You know, it's ironically, it is the home. It is the home things. I almost was brought to tears. I went to speak for a housing company, property management company, and they had me speak just the year before. And it's rare that you come back the very next year. Usually you have to wait a few years to come back. But the very next year, and this gentleman came up, right before I was going to go on stage, right before I was being introduced, gentleman came to me and he said, my wife and I were on the brink. We were about to call it quits. And when you said, you know, I'm not, it's important to ask for more and listen rather than just shutting the other person down. He says, I tried it and it changed everything. And that was probably the highest praise that I've ever gotten, is for him to say that totally changed our relationship, because I was shutting her down, and I was not, or I was making excuses, you know, instead of saying, you know, tell me more. Sure. And I thought that was a real powerful bit of feedback. So,
that's great.
Yeah.
So not only helpful in the professional world, but also in your personal life.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's where really, for most of us, that's what really matters. You know, our family, our friends, our spouses. So, you know, that's an important piece of our lives.
Yeah. Cool.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Colin. It's been great.
Thanks for listening. And again, go to the Day of Learning website where you can find all kinds of additional resources and tools. We have replays, handouts. We even have the PDF, right, which is the 50 things to say.
Now, the PDF is for those who actually go to, those who text Sarita Talk to 22828. 5-digit code to be on my email list.
Perfect. And we'll put that on the website as well, too, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's great.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, thanks. High five. We survived.
We're like